Welcome to Podiatry Unfiltered. I'm Michelle McGowan. Today I want to talk about, why are you afraid to say the price? Why are you afraid to say the price to your patients? You really need to stop apologizing for your cash pay services, the cost of them, what it entails. Because the reality is, if you don't believe in your fees, neither will your patients. I think talking about the actual services, what they cost right there while you're in the room with the patient, gives your patients more confidence that you're going to be able to deliver service than if you send a staff member in there. I know people will disagree with that, but I think that's 100%. So I want to talk today about something that I think almost every private practice podiatrist struggles with. And really, nobody really admits it. People don't have a problem talking about heel pain. It's not plantar fasciitis. It's not staffing. It's about talking about money with your patients. I think doctors can explain a treatment perfectly to a patient. They can confidently describe the pathology. They can confidently explain the diagnosis. They can explain the anatomy. They can explain why the patient needs the service. Then they get to the price. And then suddenly they look like they're apologizing for a crime they committed. I think we have to ask ourselves why. I think we need to unpack why we feel uncomfortable charging appropriately for the value we provide. I think some of this starts with the insurance mentality, right? For decades, we've been conditioned that healthcare should be covered. We feel that way ourselves when we go to the doctor. This should be covered. I pay $2,900 a month for my family of 5. We've trained ourselves to believe that if insurance doesn't pay, then somehow the treatment must not be valuable. And I think that's a core thing in podiatry. Again, because lots of times we're not taught this in residency, but it's absolutely dogma that happens within the podiatry profession and others. That's not just us. But think about what patients really spend money on. They spend money on LASIK. They spend money on cosmetic dentistry. They spend money on Invisalign. Shoot, I spent $5,000 on Invisalign for my daughter. They spend money on Botox. They spend money on personal trainers. You can lift weights at home by yourself. Absolutely, people spend money on weight loss programs, injectables, semaglutide. In my neighborhood, we have tons of direct primary care doctors. Maybe not tons, but we have tens of primary care doctors that our patients are getting concierge medicine. They're paying to have that type of relationship with their doctor. Millions of people willing to spend thousands of dollars because they value the outcome. And none of these people apologize for charging, and they shouldn't. When your patient comes into your office and you're offering the service that insurance doesn't cover, you should remember your patient already pays for cash pay prices, cash pay services every day. One of my favorite points, patients don't suddenly become incapable of spending money because they walked into your office. On the drive to your office, they probably stopped for coffee at Starbucks. $12 for one cup of coffee. Maybe they're paying for CrossFit, Peloton, country club annual dues. Where I live, Disney annual passes, a boat payment, a golf membership. People buy what they value. Say that again. People buy what they value. Really, the real question is, do they value what you're offering? I solely and wholeheartedly believe that's your job to communicate. I definitely think in the beginning, when I started doing cash pay services, I, as a doctor, was more uncomfortable than the patient with that conversation. Patients come in, they have a foot pain. They want to know, if my insurance doesn't cover it, how much will it cost me to actually get it better? Then you immediately start discounting yourself. I did it in the beginning. We have these awesome things, but insurance doesn't cover it. So you might want to go this route first. And I've got burned a bunch of times in the other direction, where patients say, no, I want to get better sooner. Can I do that now? And in the beginning, when I started doing these cash pay services, I would say stuff like, oh, insurance doesn't cover it though. I know it's expensive. And that was the wrong way to actually frame that for the patient. Lots of times patients say, no, I want to know more. And I was sometimes in the very beginning when I started doing a laser, shockwave, some of the injectables, PRP, I would throw it back like, it's totally up to you. You don't have to do this. Sometimes you almost feel like you're talking them out of it. You don't have to be that way. I'll give the example of plantar fasciitis. I'm making sure that they done their stretching. Could they do some icing? Do they have the right support? Do they need support? So I give them a 2-week buffer if they are acute, because I tell patients all the time, 75% of the people get better doing the simple things: stretching, icing, good support, no barefoot, maybe a Medrol dose pack. 75% of the people we see get better doing those things. I absolutely talk to them about, if they don't get better, we have stuff in between the non-surgical and surgery that can get them better. Some people will look at me and say, I have my daughter's wedding in 2 weeks. I have a race in a month, and they want to get better quicker. And they ask me, what would I do? If it's plantar fasciitis, I might say, hey, let's do a combination of laser and soft wave. Let's try to get you back together as quick as possible. If anything, you're giving them all their options the very first visit. If you think about it, it's like seeing somebody who has an ingrown toenail. I'll use the most simple podiatry thing. Somebody comes in, have an ingrown toenail, and they're like, what are my options? And you can say, I can snip the corner back, but it's going to come back in a couple weeks. The other option is a long-term option, and both those things, insurance covers the office visit and you snip the corner out, right? Or insurance covers the office visit and the procedure, at least for now, until Medicare screws that up for us. And you can do the more permanent procedure. I use a phenol and alcohol, and even though the phenol and alcohol matrixectomy is the more aggressive, it's something that if they have a deductible, it might cost them a little bit more. If they have a private insurance, if they're Medicare, it's the beginning of the year. But those patients look you right in the eyes, and even that's only maybe a $230, maybe it's only a $232 visit, and they may owe that for that visit. They don't care. They're in pain. They want the best possible option. You really have to stop looking at these regenerative things. If you have done them, as long as some of us that are in this space have done them, and there are people who have done it way longer than me, love those people because I think that they forged the path for us. But if you're doing soft wave or laser, and you've seen the proof of concept of your patients with insertional Achilles tendonitis, plantar fasciitis tendonitis, or peroneal tendonitis getting better, ankle sprains that were chronic getting better, or everything else failed, why are you not offering those options in that first visit and giving them all the options? And that's what I do in my practice. Somebody comes with plantar fasciitis, Achilles tendonitis, whatever the itis they have, I give them the most conservative. And if they have a quicker timeline, which they want to get better, they might choose to do the soft wave with custom orthotics. I don't want to make that decision for them. Lots of people, I think, when they talk to patients about cash, have almost already they've tried to talk the patient out of it. Oh, you don't have to. It's not covered by insurance. And really, patients don't want you deciding their financial priorities. That's not what they want. They came to you for you to make them better. They can worry about their financial decisions. They want information. They want options. I honestly think if you're somebody who has soft wave, shock wave, I don't care what kind of shock wave. I don't care what type of laser you have. If you have those options in your practice and the patient comes in and they want information, they want all the things you do. And if you're not giving them those options, that makes you a bad doctor if you have all that. So if you're somebody who does not offer regenerative medicine, if you're somebody who does not offer shockwave, laser, PRP, if you're not offering these things and you get to the point where you're not getting anybody better, I'll use an example of a patient I saw. She was my last patient of the day yesterday. She came at 3 o'clock, so we had an hour chunk of time with her. I came and I saw her. She was almost in tears. She saw a doctor that was about a half hour away from us, and she wanted a second opinion. She had insertional Achilles tendonitis. The doctor had her do a Medrol dose pack. He had her do some icing. He had her do physical therapy. I teach people how to do the stretching and all that. I very rarely send people for physical therapy for that, but he sent her to physical therapy. And when she failed physical therapy, he said, listen, we're going to need to remove this bony spur. So she decided to get a second opinion. She Googled options for insertional Achilles tendonitis. And though I'm like 35, 40 minutes away from her, she came to me. And her big thing was, I really don't want surgery. What are my options? So I skipped all the things she already did, stretching, icing, but I did a really good, all the things she's done. And she'd never done a cam walking boot. And I said to her, I'm like, listen, another option your insurance may cover is a tall cam walking boot. And we can have you in that boot for the next 6, possibly 8 weeks. And you could very honestly get better just doing icing, stretching, cam walking boot. She looked me right in the eyes and she said, what else do you have? I said, I got lots of fun things, lady. I got a class 4 laser. I have shockwave therapy. I explained what shockwave therapy was to her. I explained how I love the softwave TRT for chronic insertional Achilles tendonitis. She's had this for over 8 months. She's sick, tears almost in her eyes, and we did my package, which is 6 of the extracorporeal shockwave therapy. I added laser, so I'm stacking those together, and I had her get a heel cup because I think for insertional Achilles tendonitis, getting just a Thule's heel cup in addition to doing these other services. I said no icing. I gave her a CBD cream, and we start shockwave therapy that day. And this is what we charge. This is what I tell my patients is it's $15.77 for the package of 6. In our office, every patient fills out a VAS, so the visual analog scale. They fill that out. You should be doing that for shockwave. If you're not, you're doing yourself a disservice, but you're also doing your patient. The conversation I have with all of my patients before I do shockwave. 1, surgery is never going to get you 100% for things like insertional Achilles tendonitis. I explained to him what the actual postoperative course of care is because I did surgery for 20 years before I decided this was not for me anymore. But yes, these patients come in, we explain all of their options, and then I am the person that looks them in the eyes and I say, we charge $300 per session or $15.77 for all 6 up front. And if they do all 6 up front, we make all of their appointments over the next anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks. I have patients who come in who are runners. They have a half marathon in a month. So we'll do 2 shockwave sessions a week for the 3 weeks. And I add laser in many times. Sometimes I've been doing that more right from the beginning. Patients seem to even get better a little bit quicker with the combo or with the stacking of those services. I think it comes down to stop counting other people's money, right? I think one of the biggest mistakes people assume, that doctors assume, is their Medicare. They look like they can't afford it. They drive an old car. They're retired. They won't buy it. The reality is you have absolutely no idea what people can afford. You have to quit making assumptions about your patients. I think my general rule of thumb, as I present every single patient with every appropriate option for them. So I don't care if they look like they're in tattered clothes. I don't think if they look super young, super old, I just give it to them straight. I tell them, these are all your options, from the most conservative to regenerative to surgical. And we let the patient decide. I like to use this term, but I think it's probably appropriate, which is you're selling the outcome, not the treatment. I think a big mistake people make, like I have SoftWave, okay? I could scream it from the rooftop, but you know what? Patients don't care what SoftWave is. It doesn't matter how much I think it's amazing. It's just another thing a doctor has in their office. You don't want to sell the treatment. You're selling the outcome. And even the word selling, you're presenting what the outcomes could be. That's probably, especially if you're a doctor who has a hard time talking about money, price, and what you're doing, patients don't wake up. Like, no matter how much I love SoftWave, no matter how much I love the class for laser, patients do not wake up wanting SoftWave. Patients will go into your office wanting SoftWave, laser, PRP, orthotics. They want the outcome of what those things can do for them. Hey, I'm in Central Florida. What my patients want is, I want to play pickleball again. I want to walk at Disney World. That is the most common of all the things. I am 23 miles from Disney, and a lot of my patients, they actually judge their treatment on A lot of their judgment is I couldn't walk around Epcot. Now I'm doing 3 laps around Epcot ever since my second soft wave. We have a lot of patients here, a lot of marathons, a lot of triathlons. And the big one is whether you guys like it or not, who are very surgery heavy, patients do not want surgery if they don't have to have it. I believe a big problem with podiatry, and I love being a podiatrist. I say it all the time. It's my favorite thing. I'm so glad I did it for a living. It's the best profession ever. If you do it right, this is a freaking great profession. But yeah, I learned probably after the first 5 years, if you do a heavy surgical residency like I did, you come out and you push surgery so far to the extent that that was like one of the tools in my toolbox that I used all the time out of muscle memory, right? If you have a hammer in your toolbox, that's always what you're going to use as a hammer. But what if you put more in your toolbox? What if you put laser? You have some good outcomes with that. And now you're keeping people out of the operating room. And also you might be like, oh, but I get paid for doing surgery. If you're independent, you're a private practice, you will absolutely get paid more for the laser than you will for the surgery. The other thing is, what if you added SoftWave for instead of doing these tendon surgeries on people that sometimes people need surgery. I'm not saying they don't always need surgery, but a lot of times they don't. So what if you had that tool in your toolbox? What if you did PRP? What if you gave the patient the opportunity to do something conservative and regenerative? Other things people want to sleep through the night. So whether you're giving them some type of supplement, maybe adding the laser or soft wave to help with their neuropathy, depending on what type of neuropathy is. But the reality is that patients are buying outcomes. They're not buying procedures. So typically, I don't sell soft wave. I don't sell laser. I sell a treatment package. If you're on the Independent Podiatrist Network on Facebook, I have my old stuff up there. I will eventually add kind of what we do, but I'm constantly changing, implementing. These are all new services in the last couple of years we've added. So I feel like it's changing with volume and time. And that's part of it. Confidence. Your confidence changes everything. Once you have your proof of concept, once you see these things working, you don't need a paper to tell you. You can see it. You're like, holy heck, I got Miss Jones better for insertional Achilles. I got her better without surgery. That's pretty cool. That's a great feeling. It's a great feeling for her, great feeling for you, because you didn't waste half your day being bumped by urology and then doing the surgery, and then maybe another case. So now you have 6 hours, 4 hours of your day sucked up in the OR, where you could have been seeing patients or spending time with your family. I don't know, whatever you like to do. Imagine walking into Mercedes. The salesperson doesn't say, this is really expensive. I'm so sorry. No. I think especially when you're offering these higher end services, patients walk in knowing there's probably some type of price associated with this. They know, especially if your website is good and it's clear. Same thing with Apple. I've gone into like freaking T-Mobile and Apple a million times and bought a phone that I'm like, what the hell? This is so expensive. But the salespeople don't say that to me. I might think it. Disney? I paid $4,900 for my family of 5 to get Disney passes. If you go to the Four Seasons, your accountant or your attorney, you're not shopping around, you're paying them. Because if you're a professional and you confidently explain the value, it's worth it. And yeah, I definitely think professionals confidently explain value and then they allow you to decide. I honestly believe healthcare should be no different. I pay my accountant a nice sum of money when she does our taxes. And I love it because she does the work. Even when my taxes are freaking ridiculously expensive, I don't want to do the work. I'm confident she's doing it correctly and that I've given her the correct information to make it good. So I'll talk a little bit about my own evolution. And I think this is where this story might resonate for you. I will say, for a very long time, I've been an outlier on offering cash pay prices. When I first started my practice in 2002, I immediately wanted to put cash pay prices on my website. It was so frowned upon In 2002, when I first started, it was a totally different world. If social media existed, just for a concept, the internet was not real in 2002. But in 2002, when I first started, if I wanted to post TikToks, you would immediately, I think your state board may have come to you and said, no, you got to shut that down, or we're going to take your, we're going to shut you down here because that's not cool for podiatry. Now, podiatrists do TikTok dances and nobody gives a crap. And good for our profession, good for all the doctors. You should be able to a certain extent, exploit yourself if that's going to help your practice grow and get better. I'm all for that. But when I first started, even putting an ad with this little tiny paper, it was called the News Leader. It might still exist, but I don't use it anymore. No doctors were in that. I think one dentist, maybe, that was it. And I was like, screw this. Nobody knows who we are. None of these doctors know who we are. I was very lucky because there was only 2 podiatrists in town. That's half the reason I chose the town I was in. I looked at a space that was growing, that did not have a lot of podiatrists in the location where I want it to be in Florida. It was great. And I decided to put myself in the paper. But about 2012, I always did my own website. And in 2012, we introduced the Pinpoint laser for nail fungus. And that was the first time I put a price on our website. And then I thought, we don't take every insurance. At that point, I realized not every insurance I wanted to be on accepted that. I was young. I was only 10 years into practice. And I thought, oh, I wish I was on Humana. I can't wait to get off of Humana. But back in the day, I'm like, if we put our cash prices. So in 2012, on our website, I started to put our cash prices. So I had a cheaper price than I have now for a new patient with x-rays, follow-up, all of the things. So since 2012, I've always had transparent pricing on our website. I highly recommend, if 100% of the, like for me, ingrown toenail, that was the first one I put on there after the Pinpoint laser. We have tons of people who do not have insurance by choice because it's cheaper for them to just fly by the seat of their pants rather. But yeah, so I think at the time I put $350. Now we charge $450, and that includes their follow-up visit. They come in, uncomplicated ingrown toenail, do the procedure, and say, if in 2 weeks it's looking funky, come back in. Most people don't come back in. So then we started adding new patients with x-rays, new patients. And what I noticed, the more we put those cash pay prices on, the more we saw cash pay patients. Because they're like me. I want to know, why do I have to call to talk to your office staff to get a quote? If you know you're going to charge $450 for the ingrown toenail, charge $450. For me, a new patient, no x-rays, $235. For me, a new patient with x-rays, $275. A follow-up, $150. Patients see us, no problem. So I'm telling you that because if you do not have cash pay prices that are transparent to patients, it's going to be harder for you to break into that cash pay world. The more your staff and you get used to explaining and offering and booking cash pay price and booking cash pay patients, the more everybody starts to, one, see proof of concept. Wow, we told patients it's $450 for an ingrown toenail. They're booking, they're coming in, uneventful, great. So offering cash pay prices, having a clear, so my staff, they all know it by heart now, but also if you know anything about me, we hire gap year students. So I have my little script. So for when this wave of gap year students leave, the next year of gap year students will be able to explain it to patients. My first laser package, my first orthotics, all of these things. I didn't do orthotics for a real long time. But when I started to do the custom foot orthotics, I decided on a price. And actually, I can tell you, we've kept with the same price since I started, mainly because it's not super expensive for me to do the orthotics, and I want it to be a fair price for patients, so we charge $550. The first time I ever quoted anybody for PRP, I wrote that all down for my staff. So all of that is scripted. They don't have to freeball it. I don't know if that's the term, but they can look at a quick sheet and it tells them exactly what we charge for stuff and with a little explanation. If a patient says, oh, that's really expensive, that's fine. Because I honestly say that's not your ideal patient avatar. That's not the person you want in that room if they're going to haggle over 20 bucks. That's my personal opinion. I think what will shock you is the first time that your staff, it's actually really excellent for your staff. If you have cash pay prices, very easy for them to look at a script the first couple of times. At the first time your staff hears somebody say, okay, great, yeah, let's schedule. And then your staff's like, wait, what? I have a couple of younger people that work for me, and I have a person who's going to be graduating, taking their RN test in a couple months. And when she started a year ago, I used to, after she got off the phone, I would say, listen, you need to stop. And I have a poor person mentality. I've had it my whole life. I'm youngest of 5 kids, grew up in Jersey, and not like my parents weren't right big. We lived in a tiny little house, and we had 3 bedrooms with 5 kids, 2 parents. You do the math. It's not great. But so I think I've changed a lot in the last couple of years, but definitely that poor person's mentality. That's a real thing. And so I feel very happy for one of my gap year kids who's graduating and going on to the next level and becoming an RN, because over the last year, she's, wow, she may one day become a nurse practitioner. And if she has her own thing, hopefully she doesn't have that. I didn't have that exposure when I was 22, 23. So to have somebody say, get rid of that poor person mentality, I had to wait till I was 50 to do that. So it's hard. It's much harder when you're older. But yeah, when that first person says yes, and more importantly, the first time that someone says no, because when somebody says no, sometimes you can feel defeated. But you have to realize you didn't do anything bad. Nothing bad happened. They didn't get angry. They simply made a decision. I think once you stop fearing no, the conversation becomes much easier. And I think I mean that very wholeheartedly. I think when we first started a lot of different services, that no, I was so personally afraid of the no. And I think what really inspired me was hearing my husband's the other podiatrist in the group, and we'd have days where maybe I see 15 people, maybe he sees 20 people in a whole day each. And in that, he might see 4 to 5 people that he's done a 1577 for shockwave or laser or shockwave with orthotics or laser shockwave with orthotics. We have the same, I think one thing is keeping your pricing simple. So we have a very clear what we're trying to do with our patients, our staff, to make it more compliant and easier for everybody. But yeah, the first time he had 5 people who all did a shockwave package in one day. And there I was, still kind of just grinding on the insurance. And maybe he inspired me to at least start to offer that on the same first visit. And I wasn't good at closing that piece. I can tell you now, on an average day, I will see 1 or 2 people that will either buy the 877 package or 1577 package and insert what the treatment is. And he still beats me because he's very confident. He's very good at how he speaks to people, but he's even helped me to have a partner, somebody that actually can even show the way. Even though I'm the person that was like, we need to do this in the practice, he's the person that is the closer. And I think that's important. I think in a small business, any small business, doesn't even matter if it's podiatry or it could be like a shoe store. If you don't have somebody who has a vision, you're nothing. But if you don't have somebody who can sell the shoes, you're also nothing, right? So yeah, I think mentioning price, being comfortable with that. If you're a podiatrist, I think I don't have that because I don't see as many patients as the average podiatrist. But I also think, and this is not a brag, but I think I can tell you, in the last year, I've seen less and less people each month. But each month I continue to make more money and I have better outcomes and happier patients. And that's important. I think I talk about this all the time. So one of the biggest shifts that changed my practice wasn't learning another surgical technique. It wasn't buying another piece of technology. It wasn't marketing. But the biggest shift in my practice was becoming comfortable discussing the value with my patient. Not just the price, but the value. Patients deserve to know every treatment available to them. Patient who had insertional Achilles tendonitis, the doctor offered her everything but any of the regenerative stuff. Because he didn't have shockwave, because he didn't have laser, because he does not do PRP, he offered none of that. And his next option, after stretching, icing, Medrol dose pack, physical therapy, no boot, which I also think is a little bit of malpractice, but that's just my personal opinion, is I think he should be offering, I can tell you, in my practice, I don't do surgery anymore. So for me, if somebody comes in and they say, I want my bunion fixed, and if I talk to them about changing shoe gear, maybe trying to calm down their acute inflammation, and if they say, no, I definitely want surgery, I got a friend down the street, works for Rothman. I will send that to her all day. I have no problem with that. I think that I'm not trying to keep everything in my office. You have to look at the options. If you're not going to do the regenerative stuff, if you're not going to add regenerative medicine to your practice, that's okay. Like I think about this doctor who saw this patient. He's very close to 70 years old. I totally respect him not buying a soft wave. I respect him not buying if that's not part of his. There are parts of me that don't entirely respect it, because I think if you want to sell your practice down the line, having the most valuable practice, adding these things, if you're in your 50s, 60s, maybe approaching your 70s, and you have a podiatry practice, and you're thinking, I'd love to sell this, you need to make your practice more valuable. And if you want to make your practice more valuable, you need to be adding these types of services. Not all of them at once, but maybe it's starting the 3D printing custom orthotics to start, then adding laser or soft wave, so that you make a little money over the next couple of years. You learn the process, and then you sell your practice, which is going to generate way more income than just having shitty insurances. And I said that, and I'm sorry if anybody's offended, but patients need, and they deserve to know, patients deserve to know every treatment available to them. If insurance doesn't cover it, it does not matter. Yeah, if insurance doesn't cover it, it doesn't make it bad medicine. It just makes it not covered by insurance. I think a lot of us could agree insurance is bad medicine. It simply means someone else has to decide not to pay for it. So insurance decides not to pay for it, you explain to the patient, and they decide not to pay for it, then you've done your due diligence. Go ahead, do the surgery on them. But just because insurance doesn't cover it, you can't let the insurance company determine how you practice medicine. You just can't. Insurance sucks. And then you can't let your own personal discomfort about money, your own hang-ups, your own mentality, your mindset, from keeping patients from hearing about treatments that could genuinely improve their lives. You have to let them know. I think someday we'll be sitting through PICA lectures at your local state meeting, and it'll be somebody who could have offered shockwave, but they did a retrocalcaneal exostosis with Achilles tendon repair, and the patient wound up having some adverse effect. You have to present all the options confidently. You have to educate honestly, and then you just let the patient decide. That's the whole formula. I think I never do this, but I'd like to end this with just a challenge. For all of you guys out there who are doing any regenerative medicine, whether it's PRP, laser, soft wave, any biologic, I want you to pay attention every time you hesitate before saying the price. And just ask yourself, why? Are you protecting the patient, or are you protecting yourself from hearing the word no? Because I think once you realize the patient's decision isn't a judgment of your worth as a physician, you'll have much more authentic conversations. Your job isn't to sell every treatment. Your job is to make sure every patient knows every reasonable option. I think if you can do that with confidence and without apology, you'll not only build a healthier practice, you'll become a better advocate for your patients, honestly. So that's the end of this podcast. I think at the end of the day, I want everybody to understand. I say this all the time. I think that if you are in independent practice, for all of you that work for somebody else, God bless you. I think that's a different road than a lot of us that are independent. I was talking to my oldest child this morning, and she is actually taking a gap year and then going to medical school next year. And it's interesting because when you're in private practice, or private practice in any of the medical specialties is no different than any other entrepreneur, except some of those entrepreneurs have some business skill behind them and we don't. Some of us do. I did a little poll on my Independent Podiatrist Network and on Facebook group, and yeah, some people feel as though they were adequately trained in school or residency. And I would definitely, if you're in that group, maybe ask those people where they did their residency if you're a resident or student, because I could tell you where not to go based on even just the group of doctors who responded, no, I was not adequately trained. I don't remember once in my residency ever hearing a doctor talk about private pay for anything. And I'm sure there was things back then. People have been doing PRP for a very long time. But yeah, I think you shouldn't be afraid to talk about price with your patients. You should be able to look at a patient in the eye and say, this is what it costs for this. Insurance doesn't cover it. And we have good outcomes. Whatever your flow is in that scenario, it took me a long time. But I'm actually in a pretty good flow state right now. But myself, my husband, who's my partner, some of you guys know, we recently added a spa to our office. And the one thing I can say, and I'll just leave this in closing, is my pedicurist. She's amazing. She's a certified nail tech. She's done the medical nail course, and she's great. And we were talking about pricing and packaging, and she was a little nervous because she's like, oh, wow, I didn't see anybody today. And she had 2 people on the schedule at the end of the day that were medical pedicures. And I went into one. Dr. Henney went into the other. My husband, I don't really call him Dr. Henney because that's weird, but Tim went into the other one. And they both had a little bit of fungus on a nail. And they both wanted to do the 6 for 6, where they come in 6 months in a row, get the class for laser of the nail fungus, and get their pedicure done. And there are people out there who are not. I use the pedicure thing because I think it's such a great example. Is we see people all the time that are so excited because they've been driving to Altamont, which is a town here in Florida, to get a $260, I'll say it again, to get a $260 pedicure that's considered a medi-pedi, and ours, we charge $150. So yeah, prices will probably go up on that once we get full enough, and people will pay it. They'll pay it because there's a value. There's a perceived value, and there is real value in that. But again, Michelle McGowan, podiatrist, and I do feel like you should not be afraid. It's very much so, it's just a personal opinion. You should not be afraid to discuss price with patients. Because I feel like if you're afraid to discuss I think if you're afraid to discuss price with patients, maybe you don't believe in it. I believe in this stuff. We've used laser. I talked about that last week. I freaking used a laser on my back that I was like crying every night. I was like, maybe I should use this. And I feel amazing right now. I would have paid $500 a session for that to feel how I feel now, which is crazy. I didn't actually realize it worked that well. And in addition, there are patients that call, and if your staff is confident, if they have the right scripts, and the scripts don't last forever. The scripts are to get them confident, and then they just learn it. So you're not always looking at that, but it helps them. So I do believe if you're adding cash pay prices, definitely little nugget, have that information available for your staff. And that's it. Just don't be afraid to say the price. Patients trust you as the doctor, as the provider. Anyway, Michelle McGowan, Podiatry Unfiltered, and I really hope that this helps you to maybe push you in the direction, start implementing. And that was the last podcast, so I don't want it to be the same. This is really not about start implementing. This is really about being comfortable about talking to your patients about price. Again, people are nail techs making $280 to $300 for a pedicure. Just keep that in mind. Anyway, talk to you next time.